Paige, thank you so much for taking some time to be on the Be Love podcast. I don't know if I've ever said this to you, but I think you're one of the elders I hold in a place of I'd be happy if my life kind of moves in this direction. I love
Yeah.
all the ways that you are so curious about
Yes.
life and trying new things
Mhm.
and involved. And I guess that's where I would love to start. What
Okay.
has helped you along your journey to follow your passion and your love and bring it into the world? What
Yeah.
can you tell us about that?
I think I've had different loves at different times in my life. Some have persisted and others have been for a time. And I think what I like to say is I feel fortunate that I've had passions
Mhm.
because I have so many relatives in my life who are younger who don't seem to have passions. And so I really feel fortunate that I develop passions.
Yeah. And
and
do you feel
and
like a gift, or do you feel
it
like
no, it feels like I feel like it's a gift, and I'm sad for
mm.
my younger family members who don't. And my first love was science. So
So that was your
and
career, that was your primary career in
right,
life?
primary career. But that
Mhm.
started when I was in elementary school and high school. And I was fortunate to have really good teachers. I had a very good teacher in the fifth grade, and she let us work independently. And I wrote essays on the solar system and so forth. And
Mhm.
then in high school, another biology teacher, Susie Floyd, who she took two of us to the National Science Fair. That was my first plane trip.
Okay.
So,
So it really went.
and I remember kind of vividly in high school, one of the assignments was to extra credit if you could dissect a frog's spinal column completely intact. And so I wanted to show my mother, and she was having a bridge game, and she and her friends really weren't
Weren't
very
interested.
thrilled,
Did
but I
they?
was very thrilled.
Yeah. And did your
So
parents have an interest in science as well, or was this something that was really just unique to you?
turns out my mother did, but in her era,
Sure.
it really wasn't allowed. But
Yeah.
she became one of the first med techs in the state of Virginia.
Okay.
But of course, then you married, and this was 1930, and you stopped doing that. So then she became a volunteer woman and went up every single organization that there was.
So she
So,
also followed her passion in the way that she was able to
mhm,
at the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that one stayed with me, for a long time. Then I went to college, got a degree in chemistry, and then was a lab tech, and then went to grad school, and then was a faculty member, and I've stayed in academic medicine my entire career, and I'm still somewhat involved in academic medicine now
Mhm.
as a consultant. So science was the first one, and I did NIH grants and bench science for over 20 years.
Mhm.
So then kind of what became my second passion, uh, it was kind of education, and then part of that being leadership. I was always interested in education. For instance, I took courses at William and Mary to learn how to teach better. I was living in Williamsburg at the time. And, I was a faculty member at VC, Virginia Commonwealth University. And, faculty just didn't do that, but I felt like it was important to do.
Sure.
And then when I became department chair, it was always important for me that we had good teaching ratings. And I became involved in a microbiology chairs association education group.
Mhm.
And we put on annual workshops, I think every other year, for teaching effectiveness. And then that led me into becoming a key member in what we call program and integrated learning, which was problem-based learning in our medical school, which was unique, and it stayed for a good 20 years.
Mhm.
And and then that led me into being able to start a leadership program for women, which to advance women in academic medicine, which is now in its 30th year. Then, which I honestly, Sage, I didn't think we'd need it for 20 years, much less 30. It's needed even more now. And then that led me into the opportunity to start one focused on education, international program that I'm still very much involved with. It's global. We have over 2,000 health professions faculty from 55 countries who've taken our program, our programs, because we have an international program. We have 10 regional programs. So that's
quite a CV page. And I wonder, you're in creating these leadership programs, are you drawing on the challenges that you faced in your journey to becoming a scientist? I mean, what was that journey like for you? You were also ahead of your time in terms of how many women were involved in these graduate programs that you were in?
When I became a department chair in 1982, I believe it was, I was one of less than 100 women chairs in the country. And we still have generally we're definitely less than 50% women chairs in the country.
Did you just sort of skate through sexism? Did you learn to rise above it? What was that experience like for you in that position?
Well, I think that comes to the third love, which is persisting, which is kind of social justice. And I can't name any one particular area or incident. There were several. One was, as you rightfully say, Sage, was working in a male-dominated field. I definitely had issues. Just my department chair, for instance, promoted a man over me, and learning citations, and we had published together, this gentleman and myself. But my department chair viewed his citations as more important because he was often first author and I was second. So things like that. And the women's leadership program, that started because I took, been about almost 10 years into my department chairmanship. And I did an American Council on Education Fellowship. And so met, lots of people around the country. And I will not forget this incident. It was in April. We were visiting Washington and all the various education offices and agencies. And we were having a conversation with one of them, and there were about 6 of us from the fellowship who were there. And it was a rectangle table, and at the other end was the gentleman who was the head of the agency association. At the end where I was, the other end of the rectangular table, was me and Zach Hodges, who's now president of Houston Community College. We were good friends. There were 2 women on the right side and I think a man on the left from a fellow. After this session, one of the women on the side said, "Paige, do you know that every time you asked the association president a question, he looked at Zach when he answered?" And I said, "No, I didn't notice that." And it just came to me how much I had put in my subconscious all of these expressions over the years. The ones where said, "Oh, you're just too sensitive. Oh, you're tripping because you're in high heels." Just all these little things. Always, and I do remember, because my name is Page, and often people would think I was a man, and they would be surprised that I was a woman. And so just every time you got that, you felt like I was a stranger in a strange land. And so that was really what led me. When I had the invitation to start the ELAM program, I said, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And let me do it.
That sort of answers my other question, which was going to be, how did you deal with it over the years with these little microaggressions? And it sounds like part of you just persisted. You didn't fight each one.
I put it underground.
And you didn't even maybe notice after a while.
Didn't notice. Yeah.
That must have been quite an unveiling when that became in your consciousness. Did you have some support through that?
Right.
Sounds like you channeled it in a very powerful way to build the Leadership Institute.
I did some work then with a woman she's deceased now, Ann Wilson Chafe, 12-step work. I've done done 12-step work, and learned to do anger management, where you pound on pillows. And I realized I put it into my subconscious, and I'd also eaten, and I'd taken aspirins. I was an aspirin addict for many years. I'm lucky I still have a stomach.
Yeah.
So yes, those were ways I had coped until I kind of learned this letting your anger out in safe ways and then dealing with it. So I think
How old were you? Can I ask how old you were when that all happened? I'm curious.
That was in my 40s, 50s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's my area right now.
Yeah,
I think I'm going through similar reflections. I think that midlife time of wondering where you've been and where you're headed.
Right.
So you really did some work at that point to set you up for this next course of activity.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the other aspects of social justice. So one certainly was learning that as a woman in a male-dominated field, you have issues.
Yeah.
There's no question, and they're still there, unfortunately. I would say as much now as they were 30 years ago when we started the program.
Is that disheartening to you? What's that feel like?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. On the other hand, well, and just to go into that a little more, we just had our 30th anniversary. And the week we had the 30th anniversary, we learned that the ELAM program is having to go co-ed because of all the DEI changes in the country. So you can imagine the turmoil, and was I going to go and endorse this program in its new? However, I did go. I understood it was either close the program or you had to accept men. There wasn't any option. And with the national issues going on now. And I did make a statement. And in that statement, I reaffirmed the original, because the mission, of course, on the website doesn't show women anymore.
What does it name as its mission if the whole point was to help women in leadership?
It's now to help anyone who wants to aspire to leadership.
So we're dealing with some backlash, but I don't believe that it's going to take away from your efforts thus far. But it is a long road.
So at any rate, what in my comment, Sage, I made the statement that one, I thought that the gender equity and leadership efforts were still needed as much now as they were 30 years ago. Second, that mainstreaming any minority takes much longer, consistent effort, focused effort than we ever think. We can see that with the Voting Rights Act, which was changed, and how it's gone back. We can certainly see it with African Americans and with LGBTQ. So I think that's true. And then the third point, and the gains are very fragile. You see that. And then the third point I made was that I really view myself, Sage, as very akin to the suffragettes who never got to vote themselves, but kept persisting. And so it's going to be up to the next generation to see gender equity, and probably the next generation to see the ERA really manifest in our country. But I'm still going to do what I can.
Still do what you can. Yeah. I hold out hope that there's going to just be this balloon at some point, because women have stepped forward in so many arenas in undergraduate education and high school.
And we need the talents of both genders, both sexes, in order to do the work that the world needs.
Yeah. I often also find myself identifying with the suffragettes. I think all my studies of Helen Keller, thinking about what the world was like when she was doing her work and thinking about what the world is like now. And I have the same feeling of, have we made any progress? And yet her persistence encourages me to persist. Wow. So that's quite I love the way it feels like you've been curious about life and what's there, and then gone into it. I'm interested to hear what drew you first into science. I imagine it's just the curiosity of a child wondering about the solar system.
Well, I like the facts.
The facts.
And facts are very important to me. Certainly facts can be, science, it has interpretation. However, there are facts. Black is black and white is white. And that's one thing that I find so challenging in this era, when facts or personal opinion are equated with personal opinion. I think
truth has become.
So I always liked science, I think, much more than abstract. Like I took a philosophy course in college. No.
Wasn't for you. Well, that maybe leads to a good question of is that also what drew you to the Swedenborgian Church, kind of Swedenborg's empirical reporting on the spiritual world? Do you see there's a place for scientific inquiry? How does your spiritual life weave into this journey of yours?
That's also been kind of an exploration. It's been a journey. And, I'm not an original Swedenborgian. I got into the Swedenborgian Church because I married someone who was in it. And the marriage didn't last, but my love affair with the community and then with the Swedenborgian religion did. I grew up, so my spiritual life, I grew up as a Presbyterian. And that in itself is interesting because my father was the son of a Baptist minister. In fact, he was born in New York City when his father was a pastor at Riverside Baptist Church.
The famous church, sure.
And my mother grew up a Methodist. And then when they met, they decided to become Presbyterians because they liked the Presbyterian minister, who was the one all my young life until I went to college. He was our pastor. And so then I went to college, to a Presbyterian-related college, Agnes Scott College, and, went to Presbyterian churches there. Then I moved to New York, and I went to a Presbyterian church, Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church. That was a great church with lots of activities for young people at that time. And then married a Catholic, didn't become a Catholic, but, began to broaden my view, if you will.
Sure.
And then somehow when I got to Richmond, I became part of a Unitarian church. And when I moved to Philadelphia, I thought I'd become a Unitarian. But the Unitarian church was having some issues at the time, so I joined a Methodist church. And I still belong to that Methodist church, which is an activist Methodist church, First United Methodist Church of Germantown, going through a reparations process right now, trying to determine, because we were a wealthy white church with Tiffany windows, and what do we do? And at the same time, I'm active in the Swedenborgian Church. So I say with religion and spiritual, I take what I like and leave the rest. And
sounds like community and working with people in community. Would you say that's the most important part?
That's most important, much more than the theology.
Yeah.
I mean, after all, Swedenborg has been interpreted in so many different ways.
Yes. But the core of it is a life of kindness. So, right, the core of the theology is about community and working together.
And putting uses. I think one thing that I do like about Swedenborg is the combination of love and wisdom and uses. So that resonates very much with me.
Does that resonate from even I don't know, I'm curious about your scientific mind. What do you think about the idea that the substance of the universe is made out of love? Does that feel too mystical to you, or does that feel it's not a fact? I mean, I don't know. Where does that live in your brain?
I think its uses is more practical. It's the environment, people making the world better.
I guess sometimes I riff on love and I think about the planets and gravity. And I don't know. I sometimes do wonder if there's a way to think about love as this uniting force and the forces of the universe. Maybe that's a bigger conversation for another day.
Well, I was just reading, I read Diana Butler Bass. We got introduced to her. I think that was I did not know her until we had Swedenborg. We had her at
she came to our convention. Yeah.
Right. And so I read her, and yesterday her musings were about the new commandment to love everyone, which I think is really the way the world needs to go. And I think that's another aspect of social justice for me, is the world and accepting everyone. That's one of the joys and honors I've had, is to get to know so many people around the world. and to become more world-centric and less US-centric. We have such hubris in the US. And on the other hand, like when I went down to Brazil, I discovered that all the gas stations in Brazil have to provide 4 types of fuel. So they provide gasoline, they provide ethyl alcohol, they provide diesel, and they provide, I forget what the other one is right now, but so that you could move from one modality to another. Unlike all of the laws that we have in our country to protect gasoline.
Well,
So, we think that Brazil's, a backward country.
right. We have this idea of superiority, but when we really start to look at what's happening around the planet, creative solutions are emerging.
That goes into another kind of aspect. When I started the leadership program, at the same time, I had the opportunity to begin to learn what are called large group interactive strategies. And future search was one of them, and appreciative inquiry was another one that I have had training in. And so that has led me into a 30-year journey of becoming more appreciative, because I was definitely very negative looking, pessimistic. So becoming more that to appreciate the world, to know their strengths and focus on the strengths, not the weaknesses, to focus on what's good, to focus on abundance, not scarcity. So that's also been part of my journey, and not quite sure where it fits in, but it certainly has been.
It feels like it fits in very well. And I imagine some of that work you did in your 40s and 50s, dealing with your anger, probably helped you to be able to be more appreciative and open. And it's an interesting lens on facts, because I think it brings up that our stance does affect the way we perceive the world. That is a reality. And it's another one of my favorite Helen Keller quotes, where she says, nature gives its secrets to those who love it. So as we love the life that we're perceiving, we can appreciate it. And when we appreciate it, we can see more about what's might be going on and what's possible.
Yeah, when you have an appreciative or a positive mindset, you have a greater ability to broaden and build. That's from Barbara Fredrickson. She's a researcher on positivity.
And I think that's sort of what we're seeing in the world right now with the wrestling of what's true. A lot of what's shaping that is people's fear stance or people's willingness to be curious.
And to me, the abundant scarcity has been an important aspect to, I had the misfortune, if you will, to be in a medical school that went bankrupt. The only one, I think, in the 1900s. And so at the time I was doing the training with Ann Wilson Chafe, and I had a car accident driving in Montana, and I spun around and the car was damaged, had to go back to the airport and get a new car, but I was not hurt. I didn't hurt anyone else. What came to me at that time, this was one of the mystical experiences that kind of led me into the Swedenborgian church with joined the Portland New Church when Wilma Wake was pastor. And so she was my entree and did study with her. So anyway, that experience was God saying to me, you see, this was in the middle of the bankruptcy. I'd been working flat out to write a grant to try to get money to see that I can take care of you. So grieve the past and move on. And that kind of gave me permission to move into this new area, to kind of stop my science career and to move into this new career of leadership, mentoring programs, and so forth, faculty affairs.
Yeah, that sounds very powerful. And I'm struck by, this is something I think about a lot, mystical sometimes feels like out of body, out of world, and yet sometimes it feels like mysticism is really just getting us back in touch with just how the universe operates. We let go of things, we move into new things. Certainly the natural world is an abundant resource that renews itself, and yet we can be kind of alienated from that. And then these little moments kind of plug us back in. I think I will be okay next. There are other options for me, and we can
the other was the here is proof. It's talking about fact. Here is
Yeah.
proof
Yeah.
that I, God, can take care of you.
So it was a fact. It was
Right.
a good for
Yeah.
your observant mind to have that
Right.
tangible experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And having that abundant mindset right now when our world is so heavily populated and we're facing climate change, and how do you maintain your abundant mindset? What helps you to hold that
Um,
perspective?
One is I subscribe to several positive news channels. One is Optimist Daily,
Oh yes, yeah.
which I very much like.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is Good,
Okay.
which comes out, I think, weekly. And then I hope this magazine is continue. I know they're having a challenge. Is the Yes magazine of Positive Futures out of the Seattle area. So those are I routinely read those three. Two are online, and I get the Yes magazine.
We'll have to include links to those in when we post this article. I bet others will want to hear about them. And are they stories? Are they about people? Is it all?
It depends. Optimist. I also what I do is I cross post, or when I find something Optimist Daily or Good, or I will post them to my Facebook page.
Okay.
To try to amplify however I can, and often they're scientific innovations that are helpful.
Yes.
Like the one that I just posted was a company that has done 3D printing of a wheelchair for children, and the plans are free. So anyone can, and you can 3D print a part if you need it. If something, if a wheelchair gets right. So, that could be a game changer in many different areas of the world. They often are scientific innovations to show that science can be helpful for this world.
Yes, believe
That
it. I believe
facts can be helpful for this world.
And especially when we share them freely, not to make a profit, but to advance the well-being of all people.
Examples of cities or countries that will, like, I think it's London has made environmental stipulations, and they have, over 5 or 10 years, they have decreased the damaging particulate matter in the air tremendously. So when countries or cities do policies, so that's another one that the research shows it has a positive. So again, we get back to facts.
Right.
That shows it has a positive effect. Why not? Why don't more people do it?
Right.
More cities do it. More countries.
Right. We have to have the moral will and obligation to make the choice, but to have that information of what's possible. I do take some comfort just learning stories of pollution that existed in the 70s that has been reversed. Things, we can make improvements in our world. We can make things better, and it's just making that choice. Well, and I guess one other thing about the facts, which has really, I preached this last Sunday on the greatest commandment, and I was just, the fact is we all exist on this planet together. That's a fact. The fact that, the idea that we're Americans and Brazilian, like, that's something we've determined and we've collectively decided on. It's not really a fact in the same way. So the facts are actually very much in line with the spirit of we are here to love each other. So that mystical awareness of our oneness is really just getting in line with the facts that we're all connected. Yeah.
If we don't take care of this world,
yes,
we're all going to have a problem.
Yes. And to love each other is loving ourselves, because if others are well, we'll be well, that there's a reciprocity to that.
That's one thing that this international leadership program, for instance, I had never learned of the term Ubuntu. And again, that echoes what you're just saying, Sage. That
share about that for our listeners and what that means to you.
Ubuntu means that what I do has an effect on you, and what you do has an effect on me. I know that's probably a better explanation.
That basic truth that I do wonder sometimes. We've seen a lot over these last few hundred years, and it doesn't look pretty from many perspectives. And maybe it's just like the greatest possible learning and what not to do. If we can harness all that wisdom, our species could have a pretty good run for a
Right.
while. If we wake up to this foundation. Yeah. Well, thank you for doing your part, Paige. And what's your passion right now? What's emerging in your heart
Well,
at the moment?
I would say that it's art.
Yeah. And when did that emerge and how did that come into being?
Well, I always did. My mother had us take art with a cousin,
Okay.
so art was kind of part of our life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my father was a photographer journalist originally before he became a newspaper executive.
Mm-hmm.
And so we always, he was always taking movies of us at
Mm-hmm.
holidays and pictures and doing special Christmas cards. And so I was kind of grew up with it. He gave me his Rolleiflex camera, which I used and loved for many years. And then in college, I was a painter of the sets for the plays, and I did our yearbook, which most of the photography, and that was, of course, those were days of the darkroom photography. So I did much of the photography for that yearbook, and so I just sort of kept it on, but it was a back burner. And then we had the opportunity to start a cooperative art gallery in Bernathen in 2000 or 2001. We kept it for 20 years until the pandemic. The building is now gone. We saved it for 20 years, historic farmhouse. And so I think that brought it back. I took several workshops with what's the Artist Way workshops,
Sure.
including one with Julia Cameron,
Yeah, she's great.
and that was very important for me to give myself permission to put a studio table right in the middle of my living room
Yep.
so that I wouldn't have to clean up things.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And and so my first foray was greeting cards, and I still do greeting cards because that's art you can do in like 15 minutes. You can create a greeting card. But the I think the international program has really led me into more of it because I learned that I wanted to do multilingual cards and multi language cards to kind of honor all of the people in the program. For instance, I used to get upset when I was helping some of my Asian friends with writing. And then once one of them said, I had to learn 4 languages to practice medicine. And I realized, I've had luxury
Mm-hmm.
of 80 plus years to hone my English skills and growing up in a journalistic writing family. So I now give that gift. You know, I'm just very happy I can help people.
Yeah.
So that was back to writing, but to honor them
Yeah.
with their languages. And that I've done a calendar for over 30 years for friends, but then broaden it to be a gift to the people who do so much volunteer work for our organization
Mm-hmm.
to give to them. And then that's led, with the pandemic, has led to we choose a word each year. And I have people around the world translate it. So the cover has a translation. And
Mm-hmm.
then we have 12 images of around the world with quotes. And next year, I'm in the process of working on the 2026 calendar. And the word is kindness, which I do think we need more kindness in the world. So back to
That does seem like a theme with so much of how love has called you. Each passion does seem like there was a noticing of a lack of kindness, and how can I make space to bring in
Well,
more?
the words so far have been joy was the first,
Mhm.
because joy's been a mantra of mine for when I moved away from pessimism.
Yeah.
Joy was what sort of came out. So joy's been definitely a mantra of mine.
Hmm.
Then the next word was light, be more light in the world. The next word was courage. And then this year's calendar is resilience, and next year's is kindness. So we're kind of on a pattern, and people select the word. I put out a variety of words, and people select the word.
So it's a mix of your inspiration and then community, which also
Right.
seems such a
And then
need.
with the word translations, definitely community.
Yeah, you need
And
everybody to participate.
just here's another fact. So for translations, I go to, of course, Google first,
Yeah,
and then I get what appear to be translations, and I send it out. And about these days, about 60% are correct, but the other 40% are not.
that doesn't seem very good for Google.
So,
Interesting.
so, so anyway,
Hmm.
so it is important to check.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know you've been dabbling with AI, and it's like there's all these facts available on the internet,
Yeah.
and yet if they're disembodied from human beings actually living in this reality, they can that can also lead us astray. It can
Right.
give us bad information. Yeah.
Yeah. So I work with primarily Claude
Mm-hmm.
AI
Mm-hmm.
platform, and I do like it particularly for brainstorming and for revising my text to be less scientific, if you will, and make sure it's 11th grade English and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. So I am having fun doing it. Tell you one area I'm using Claude in now. I'm doing a fair number of writing letters to congressmen and also to the Federal Register when they ask for comments. And often you get these requests for write a letter, and they give you a template, and it's pretty much hype, you know, and fear based. And so I put it into Claude and say, please make this more evidence based. And it does a really good job.
You got to give it directions. It
Right.
feels there
Oh,
feels like there's some resonance with that and how we are called to learn to use our brains, to not be led by them, but to
yeah.
give them
Oh, it's
give them instructions.
very important to give a good long prompt of
Yeah.
what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what I'm looking. Well, thank you for all of your wisdom, Paige. Do you have any last thoughts for us about love?
For what supports it, you mentioned it before,
Hmm.
community,
Yeah. Yeah.
being in community. For the social justice work, it's been so important to be, we have a longstanding group at First United Methodist Church of Germantown, and that's been really a major support as well as learning. And the social justice committee in our Swedenborgian church, I think has been very important to me, and the SAR. So I can't say enough about having that type of support. With the Animals and Chafe work, we started a group, and a number of people have died now, so there are just three of us left. We meet weekly by Zoom. So yes, having people who can call you accountable. I see you doing this again. One of the things that gets in the way of loves and passions is, for me, is overcommitment.
Yeah.
And so having people who will call me and say, I see you becoming overcommitted.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds
Honing
like
our passion and our gifts is so requires, not throwing it off into things that are maybe not primary, and it can be
right.
so tempting.
Right.
The world is full of so much need. Yeah.
Another another one for me in keeping focused is having commitments to hold me accountable.
Yeah.
Like right now, I've done work with Patty Dye for a number of years in her book club, where we have a book each month that we're reading on that has a social justice issue. And another, I'm doing a course with Meg Wheatley right now on related to her kind of spiritual warriors. So this is the way I hold myself accountable. If I sign up for something like this, then I know I'm more likely to do it.
Yeah.
It's like I have an exercise trainer, because if I don't do it, then I won't do the exercise. So this is a way of holding myself accountable.
Love that.
So
It seems like there's some wisdom in that when you started with, I have passion and I feel badly for those who don't. And it feels like it's been a gift for you, but also something that you have cultivated and then also relied on other people to help support you. And I feel like there's a beautiful loop there that's really important. And for those who don't feel passion, sometimes plugging into community could be the thing that could help light that
with
fire a
passion.
bit. Yeah.
And also and the accountability, because in social justice, we whites can kind of drop away.
We can skid by without really paying much attention, can't we?
And so I think that's why I keep doing these things to hold myself accountable. And then I think taking the long view is another one to keep me going. That's been very helpful to view myself as suffragettes and that.
When you have the long view, how far ahead do you tend to look? Is it like all the way to eternity? Is it like
No, to the
100
next generation,
to the
next
next generation?
next couple of generations.
Yeah.
Although I have a piece of art that I have, it's been in several shows, where if you've seen Friedrich's seven generations
I don't,
sculpture.
I don't know that I have. No.
It's a series of steel iron cutouts of a figure,
Okay.
and it gets smaller as you go back. And in the seventh generation, there is an embryo,
Okay. Sure.
and so it comes from the Native American wisdom to think seven generations ahead when you're making major decisions. So I think that's kind of as far as I as I go.
That's a pretty good scope. That's a pretty good scope, and that gives you a little perspective on thinking of yourself as a suffragette, because that wasn't 7 generations ago, right? That was less than 7 generations. So there's still time to unfold this human story. Well, thank you so much for your time, Paige, and
Okay.
holding others accountable and bringing more love into the world. I love all the things you're creating, and happy to be on the journey with you.
And thank you. This was a lovely interview. Thank you.
And I love it when we both are in this